This story comes out of a belief that the people who were not in my life could have made a difference, more of a difference than the people who were in my life. I believed if my aunt had lived, the sheer force of her presence would have benefited me immensely. This train of thought has some of the same appeal as the old lament, "I must have been switched at birth, I don't belong in this family." I was 5.5 years old when my aunt died. I don't remember her, but my mother had snapshots, a portrait photo, and a few newspaper photos, for she had been a fashion model. For years and years after her death, some of her clothing was stored in my mother's closet and chest of drawers. My mother wore the chic hat and muff that belonged to her sister, but she never wore the ski pants and boots, the white sharkskin tennis dress, the jodhpurs and sleek leather riding boots. As a child, I tried on these pieces, and also the embroidered peasant blouse and the felt appliqué alpine suspenders. My aunt had been young, beautiful, and athletic. In a letter written to my mother a few weeks before my aunt's death, she asks if I know how to swim. She doesn't believe I do. Her new husband, who is as old as her father, is set on teaching me come summer when they open the house at the lake and we will be invited. So there it is, the promise of a better life: skiing, horseback riding, tennis, and swimming at the lake. It was 1942. My aunt was married on February 28th, and 1 month later she was dead. She was 23 years old. This wasn't her first marriage. She had been married briefly right out of high school to a boy her age. I was told it had been annulled. Her new husband was 59 years old. Born in San Francisco, he was a prize fighter before coming to Nevada after the 1906 earthquake. A forward-thinking man, he developed the telephone and telegraph services for Carson Valley. He was well-known and well-connected. The couple was staying at the Minden Inn until they opened their summer home. At the inquest, the hotel manager and a hotel guest both testified that Mrs. Phillips appeared depressed and despondent on the afternoon of her death. The sheriff stated a .38 Colt revolver was found under the body. The three-man jury deemed that death was due to a gunshot wound, self-inflicted. My uncle testified as far as he knew, his sister was unfamiliar with firearms. At the time of her death, her husband was 30 miles away and on his way back to the inn. My grandparents, already upset about her marriage, were convinced that her husband had caused her death. My uncle and grandfather attended the inquest and had the remains transported to the Bay Area for burial. Years later, my uncle told me Gene Phillips was visibly distraught at the funeral and internment, but my grandparents refused to acknowledge him. My uncle also told me that he had once helped arrange an abortion for my aunt. Fashion models were exposed to high-living people and their drugs and other vices, he said. 10 years ago, I was in Minden and thought maybe I could find out something about this family tragedy. I spoke to a few old-timers who remembered Gene. "Oh, yes, that death was very, very hush-hush. There was gossip that he might have done her in. He had a temper. He never smoked or drank, but he had a temper. He could be quite charming. And he wore shorts before men around here wore shorts." I left Minden in 1935. I was an operator for Gene. He was a ladies' man, but he was always good to me. "Well, he had a temper through things. Some people said he beat his wife. Oh, yes, he married again." So what happened? Was my aunt depressed? Did she act impulsively, not thinking of the consequences? Did she decide she'd made a terrible mistake? Or was her husband angry and seeking revenge for some transgression? I don't know, and there isn't enough information to piece it all together. But she was only 23, and she had her whole life ahead of her. For me, she is like a ghost, a laughing, fun-loving ghost, a shimmer of youthful promises. And I never did learn to swim.